Tribal Elder Isabella Zamet.
Bonjour. Bonjour. Ning na doeg sa ket kwen dish ni kas pitchin do dem kwa enademoy. Hello, my name is Flying Spirit Woman, and I am of the Robin clan. Chini gwech kadin nem kenem nedok oshtemam pinang go gataga brieg. Wabanong, Jaunong, Epidishma, Giwednong, Spimengishum, Shkakumakwe, Mampinanagwe, Wheel. I say thank you to all the spirits from the direction of the east, south, west, north, up above, below, and from right in the middle, from all of us. Chinigwech, Kudigum, Kinam Nidok, Maba Nesewin Shkode Minoa Bish Mino Ake. To the spirits of the air, fire, water, and land, we say thank you to you. Migwechye Kinandinanonik, Neshik, Giboig, Wesink, Minom Nidosak. To the spirits of the birds, animals, fish, and the insects, we say thank you to all of you. Minoge, Gananiganijik, Minamampibinojik, Gananiganijik, Migwechgeginogdigun. To all our ancestors and to the children that went ahead before us, we say thank you to you for whatever that we are here for. Migwechgendinanonik, Getzijik, Minojik, Minomampikana Eajik. To all those that are here, and to the elders and to the children, we say thank you to you. To the spirits of everybody, and to all our families, and to everybody that's here to make this possible. Migwech dikdame kinamampi kinagoya eya. Migwech demanda no kaden de moin, naden de moin, mino zagidwin, kinagoya emoshknesh kawit. Migwech dikdame. To everybody that's here, may you have peace, respect, love, and thank you for all of that. Migwech dikdame manda akazawayam dazon, chibodet pinagun. And for the diseases that we don't see, thank you for us not having them. Migwech nikdame kinanangum nagijak, minomandagameo, kinagego, mumpi. And for the rain and everything that's with us today, chimigwech nikdame, aha, migwech, 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 aha.
At this time, we'd like to turn it over to our Zeboing director, William Johnson, and he's going to go ahead and explain the next part of our ceremonies, and this is the solemn occasion of our honoring, healing, and remembering ceremony. And I'd like to ask our Onion Creek singers to go ahead and to help us with our student roll call. William Johnson.
Nindawe Maganadu, Makade, Wase, Yamaguns, Nadishnakas, Makwa, and Dodane, Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, and Dao, Saginaw, Aking, and Don Jaba. Welcome, everybody. We're going to have the opportunity to recite the 227 names of the students that perished while they were attending the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School. It's a beautiful day to honor these ancestors and our family members. I had the opportunity this morning to pay tribute to one of our fellow family members in the Mission Creek Cemetery. And as I was saying hello to John Thomas, little did I would know that I would be gifted John's placard in his memory today. And it's a beautiful occasion, wouldn't you agree? Carrying John's name after I said good morning to him and that we were thinking about him today. And I was fortunate enough to be able to receive his placard as I danced it into our sacred circle today. I'm also carrying Wilson Johnson. Wilson Johnson is my great uncle, my grandfather's brother, who perished when he was only 17 years old at the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School. And everyone is carrying a family member. We have Faith Montoya Pigo. She is carrying in Ulysses S. Pelcher. And we know that she was hopeful to receive his little placard so she could dance him into our sacred circle today. And look at her, she has a beautiful picture and showing everybody our tribal community. And we're most thankful for Faith and taking the time to honor Ulysses S. Pelcher today. So where's our tribal youth? Miss Courtney Kagagab is going to come with the tribal youth, and we're going to orate all 227 names and our Onion Creek drum. After each one of the students' name is called out, we want the honor beat loud and proud for each one of our family members. Are we okay with that? Yes, sirs. All right. And then we have Tanya with us. Tanya.
Honey, Saginaw Chippewa Youth Council Advisor. We have our youth council here that will be doing the roll call. We're going to have Christian start.
Edward Novotny, Louis Joseph, Daniel Thompson, Collins Moses, Joseph Bennett, Henry Pigo, Myron Gordon, Wilson Johnson, Joseph Ayak, Jay Adams, Harry Passionate, Raymond Chatfield, Amos Wilson, or Williams, my bad. Peter Adams, Ulysses Pelcher, Noah Henry, Eli Wheaton, Daniel Agosa, David Kiwe, Daniel Thompson, Joseph Gravel, Oscar Lehe, Wesley Peters, Robert Marks, Andrew Thompson, Henry Guilbeau, Thomas Eggson, Lehman Jackson, James Jackson, Kenny Bradley, Peter Fish, Alexander Shaw, W. Woodengosh, Joseph Chippewa.
Next we have Kylie Wimmerwans. Agnes Agosa, Lottie Marberto, Jenny Kagigan, Martha Silas, Anna Finty, Mercy Hall, Sarah Adams, Rhoda Collins, Lucy King, Rebecca Shaycroft, Elizabeth Rapp, Martha Kuhn, Mary Williams, Pearl Fisher, Elizabeth Augusta, Elsie Augusta, Clara Fisher, Teresa Choza, Annie Pigo, Mary Bowen, Ava Mae Chapman, Clara Collins, Jesse Cogigab. Next, we have Tayden Davis,
Henry Thompson, William Osquagan, Theodore Pelcher, William Corbin, Fred Foster, Isaiah Walker, Dennis Dunn, William Westbrook, George Williams, Charles Augusta, Barney Pontiac, David Chippewa, Willie Jackson, Joseph Hardley, Lou Jackson Jr., Jace Corbin, Samuel Foster, John Pontiac, David Williams, Louis Strong, W. Thomas, James Hamlin, John Thomas, William Winchester, Elijah Jackson, Richard Foster, Charlie Nixon, Edward Cheener, Joseph Solomon, Louis Kiwe Gashcombe, Peter Eggleston, Edwin Andrew, Eddie Winnie, Edward Messenger, Jay Harrington, Reed Cloth Kearns.
next we have Jocelyn Shaw,
Esther Otto, Maud Lyons, Grace Silas, Emma Redbird, Sarah Chingwa, Regina Fisher, Leota Sagan, Martha Tadgason, Sarah Shakra, Angelina Johnson, Grace Peters Bennett, Maggie Cummings, Ida Andrews, Rose Joseph Sampson, Louise Augusta, Julia Bailey, Lena Hetras, Aggie Foster, Deli Bennett, Mary Pelcher, Helen Andrews, Mabel Shawano, Aline Kay, Bertha Wheaton, Rose O'Demon.
next we have Jacob Quigno Grundle,
Daniel Strong, Louis Valier, Roland Paul, William Battis, Wesley Moses, Samson Williams, Isaac Mix, John Franzway, Edward Andrews, Wallace Shaker, Joe Alexander, Joseph Chippewa, Isaac Ashcroft, Joseph Williams, Clarence Me Davis, Silas Hart, David LaPointe, Frederick Fisher, Loggers Collins, Wallington Pelcher, Edward Jackson, David Thompson, Charles Shagnoba, Albert Francis, Frank Dutton, Dennison Pelcher, Edward Green, Lyman Oak, Robert Passiony, Joseph Bennett, Samuel Shaw, Jacob Magante, Isaac Berg, Joseph Pontiac, and John Chippewa.
Next, we have Kyla Henry.
Rosa L. Emma Thompson, Blanche Bellows, Jenny Bennett, Jesse Chatfield, Emma Bill Jackson, Sarah Watson, Anna Pontiac, Lizzie Spruce, Minnie Thompson, Kelsey Bradley, Anna Jackson, Charlotte Watson, Bessie Brown, Agnes Dutton, Victoria Rapp, Esther Sophia Thompson, Amelia Johnson, Grace Huntley Pontiac, Lucy Jackson David, Elizabeth Otto, Rachel Collins, Alice Walker, and Jeanette Thompson.
Next, we have Asa Quigno Grundle,
Grace Dutton, Jenny Rapp, Mary Ann Dutton, Matilda Bradley, Grace Nottawa, Effie Shabus, Esther Solomon, Alma Paul, Jenny Gruitt, Lucille Chippewa, Ida Johnson, Jane Pontiac, Mary Boca, Ida Bolton, Dinah Gannon, Elizabeth Adams, Naomi Pocher, Ida James Fisher, Eliza Pano, Sarah Williams, Elizabeth Thompson, Magia Francis, Ida Rose, Isaac, Ashwa.
next we have Tara Hunt,
Elsie Gertrude Dijik, Jenny Corbin, Allison Peters, Lena Otto, Thelma Peters, Blanche Bennett, Frances Shakoff, Lena Elk, Flossie Jackson Blackmer, Nancy Bennett, Girl, Mary Shawagan, Victoria Fichette, Alice Cheekham, Ida Chidness, Annabelle Wimmerblance, Bessie Irons, Emma Williams, Mary Corbin, Amelia Batiste, Nancy Bennett, Cecilia Rapp.
So on this solemn occasion, reciting the 227 students that perished while they were attending the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School, these are our Saginaw Chippewa Tribal Youth Council. They are sticking up for the ancestors and for our way of life. So how about a round of applause for these young people?
You know, we come today on the 88th anniversary of the closing of the boarding schools, which created so much generational trauma for our people. We come here to heal today, to remember them, honor them for their pain, their suffering, their strength, and their resilience. You know, I say deep felt sympathy to all the family members who lost their children during these days. Sorry. It's sad, but we know these children. There are guiding spirits now. They'll always be with us. They'll always be in our hearts. I'd like to thank the MIPS committee and all the volunteers on behalf of council for putting this excellent event together year after year. It takes a lot of hard work and dedication. We appreciate all the time and the effort that you do to bring us all together so we can fellowship and remember all those that we lost. We'd like to thank the City of Mount Pleasant and Central Michigan University for their continued support, their continued partnership, and helping to educate the community members. Sorry, I just get a little choked up over the kids. I thank all the tribal nations who came today to help us celebrate and honor these children. I thank all the families, all the community members. On behalf of our tribal council, we surely do appreciate each and every one of you. We're happy to see you guys, and it's wonderful that we can gather together again now that the COVID pandemic's not keeping us all isolated. It's good to be out there to socialize and see each other and see the smiling faces. I just thank everybody from the bottom of my heart. And I'd like to say a special thank you to our keynote speakers, Rochelle Adawagijic, I'm so sorry about that, and Dr. Samuel Torres. We appreciate each and every one of you, and as we continue up through the day and we wake up tomorrow, just remember to love everybody, respect everybody, give everybody a hug. We're not promised tomorrow, so make sure that the last time you see somebody will be a great memory for you. And we hope to see each and every one of you again next year. And once again, on behalf of our tribal council and our tribal community, welcome and thank you for helping us celebrate the lives of our lost children.
Chippewa Tribal Chief Teresa Peters Jackson. You know, one of the things that Chief reminds us is the solemn occasion where these little ones are gone, but we remember them in our hearts, and we come together every year. But it's been a while since we've came together on these grounds with the pandemic. It's been a challenge, and just being able to get together this morning at sunrise ceremonies, those of you that attended, you could feel the spirit, you could feel the warmth, but part of that, you can feel the pain also. And to go ahead and to quote Don Coyas, our friend from White Bison, one of the things that he talked about was, how do you forgive the unforgivable? And I think Chief Jackson pretty much mentioned that, this can be a sad occasion, but there are teachings, and our indigenous knowledge keepers, they let us know the importance of honoring our ancestors and how that makes our ancestors feel, and the importance of 7 generations. helping our generations move forward. That's one of the trust responsibilities I see from educators. And I have one of my friends from education that's with us this morning. CMU President Robert Davies has been a proponent of being able to go ahead and to put a face on this relationship we have with our brothers and sisters at CMU. And this is one of the events that Dr. Davies always wants to know on how he can help. And to go ahead and to know Bob, we get to see him in our community. He gets to interact with Chief Jackson and Tribal Council, and the Saginaw Chippewa tribe has no better friend from Central Michigan University than Bob Davies.
Thank you so much. Bonjour. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, our faculty, our staff, our students, and alumni of Central Michigan University, I thank you for the opportunity to join for this day of reflection in honoring, healing, and remembering. This gives us a chance to tell stories, to learn from one another, and most importantly, to heal together. It is also an honor to be here today with Mayor Fischbacher and also Chief Jackson, two individuals who I very much enjoy working with. I'm also very pleased to see so many faculty, staff, and students and alumni from Central Michigan University in the audience with us today. For many decades, this school was a place of sadness and separation. Children were taken from their families and their communities. They were forbidden to speak their languages and practice their spirituality. This experience created a devastating loss of identity, heritage, culture, and tradition. We know indigenous communities here in Michigan and around the continent continue to feel the impact of those losses today. We know of 227 children who passed on from this school alone, and hearing those names being called with the honor drumbeat puts it into so much context. But so many other generations and so many others were also tremendously impacted. That's why it's always important to honor, to heal, and to never, and always to remember and never forget. Today, we acknowledge the injustice of that past, and we commit to working together to ensure such tragedies never occur again. Healing together means proactively seeking opportunities to protect and preserve, as well as to enrich the future. Our university community is proud and privileged to play a role in these efforts. We join you in celebrating the strength of the spirit, of the culture, and the community of our neighbors in the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe. We look forward to continuing programs such as the Denison Visiting Professorship Series, which brings Native American scholars to share their stories, research, and experiences. We are honored to play a role in preserving the culture and history through collections housed in our Clark Historical Library, which I was able to talk to several of the leaders today, and how important that is to understanding, to continue the honoring, the healing, and the remembering. We will continue to come together during Native American Heritage Month to learn more about the indigenous culture and history and share it with our students who come from around the country. And we are thrilled to be a part of the Celebrating Life, the annual powwow held at CMU. We are grateful for the efforts of CMU's North American Indigenous Students Organization and the Office of Native American Programs. Members of them are with us today, and I want to thank them, the staff, their leadership, as well as the students and faculty who graciously share your culture with our campus community. And we are deeply grateful to the members of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe for the continued partnership to bring educational activities and engaging programs at CMU. For the benefit of our students, our community, and our country, and for all future generations, we must continue this very, very important work. I am proud to stand with you today in commemoration of this historic moment. Thank you for allowing us to be part of this important day of honoring, healing, and remembering Chi Miigwech.
Jim Gwetch, CMU President Robert Davies. I would like to go ahead and to mention it's in the government cooperation that tribal nations have with local municipalities where a lot of the challenges exist. But one of the relationships that we've been able to enjoy as Saginaw Chippewa people is to be able to have a seat at the table. And whether it's with our township governments or with our county governments, a lot of times it happens with the city governments also. And representing the city of Mount Pleasant, we have Mayor Amy Perschbacher with us, and she's going to go ahead and to talk a little bit about this relationship. Mayor?
On my paper it says good morning, but I'm going to say good afternoon. I'd like to thank Chief Jackson and the council for the invitation to speak today at this very important ceremony. On the 6th day of June, we gather to honor and remember those whose lives were changed, those whose lives were taken before they were able to give the world their abilities and fulfill their destined purpose. We honor those children, those stolen children, the lost generations of stewards of our earth, by remembering so we never return to the ignorance that claimed their lives. The city of Mount Pleasant, along with many of our community partners, stand strong in our resolution that these lives taken will never be forgotten. We must honor those lives by being good stewards to their memories and to our earth, as they would have been taught in those ways by their families, cultures, and communities. As a mental health therapist, I understand the effects of intergenerational trauma. The trauma of families losing their children, not just those who did not return home, but the trauma inflicted on those who were able to return home. The changes in their view of the world and the loss of their childhood. That has been passed down through the generations. We gather today to continue the healing, to continue to hold each other up with respect and support, and to continue to move forward by creating a world that respects and celebrates our differences and all the gifts that we have to offer. As we gather here today, let us gather with respect and support for each other. Let us continue to grow in the strength of our communities and our partnerships. Let us move forward from this dark history by working together to create a better world for our young generations to thrive in. We cannot change our past, but we can work together to preserve the memories, the stories, and the languages of the many Native American tribes and people, so that generations here and in the future will know who they are and how important their lives were. Thank you.
Chief Gwetch, Mayor Perschbacher. As we're web streaming our event live on the internet, and we'd also like to thank Kevin Chamberlain for helping us out with our sound. And I'm going to go ahead and ask for Kevin's support, because he's going to go ahead and help us with the address that our U.S. Secretary of Interior Director Deb Haaland did. And please turn your attention to the video screen, please. And we'd like to go ahead and to play this video for you. Interior Secretary Deb Haaland.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to welcome you to the Department of the Interior, which sits on the ancestral homelands of the Anacostan and Piscataway people. Land acknowledgements recognize the indigenous people who are the original stewards of the lands where we live and work, making them as part of acknowledging who we are and who has been here. It's about the history of the land and the people. This is the same reason that we often speak about traditional or indigenous knowledge. My ancestors lived sustainably in the Southwest and survived famine and drought with the understanding that future generations would rely on their hard work and sacrifices. I can't help but think about the environmental tragedies that might have been avoided, like the Dust Bowl, the extinction of the passenger pigeon, and the growth of extreme wildfires across the West if the federal government had consulted with and respected the practices of stewarding the earth that indigenous people developed over millennia. As the federal government moved the country west, they also moved to exterminate, eradicate, and assimilate Native Americans, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians. The languages, cultures, religions, traditional practices, and even the history of Native communities, all of it was targeted for destruction. Nowhere is that clearer than in the legacy of federal Indian boarding schools. For more than a century, tens of thousands of indigenous children were taken from their communities and forced into boarding schools run by the U.S. government, specifically the Department of the Interior and religious institutions. The consequences of federal Indian boarding school policies, including the intergenerational trauma caused by forced family separation and cultural eradication, which were inflicted upon generations of children as young as 4 years old, are heartbreaking and undeniable. When my maternal grandparents were only 8 years old, they were stolen from their parents' culture and communities and forced to live in boarding schools until the age of 13. Many children like them never made it back to their homes. Each of those children is a missing family member, a person who was not able to live out their purpose on this earth because they lost their lives as part of this terrible system. This is not new to us. It's not new to many of us. As indigenous people, we have lived with the intergenerational trauma of federal Indian boarding school policies for many years. But what is new is the determination in the Biden-Harris administration to make a lasting difference in the impact of this trauma for future generations. The federal policies that attempted to wipe out Native identity, language, and culture continue to manifest in the pain tribal communities face today, including cycles of violence and abuse, disappearance of indigenous people, premature deaths, poverty and loss of wealth, mental health disorders, and substance abuse. Recognizing the impacts of the federal Indian boarding school system cannot just be a historical reckoning. We must also chart a path forward to deal with these legacy issues. To address the intergenerational impact of federal Indian boarding schools and to promote spiritual and emotional healing in our communities, we must shed light on the unspoken traumas of the past. Today, we take a critical step forward in that work. Last June, I launched the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative, a comprehensive effort to address the legacy of federal Indian boarding school policies. That initiative starts with shining a bright and undeniable spotlight in the form of an investigative report led by Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, Brian Newland. This report is a significant step by the federal government to address the facts and consequences of these policies. I am so incredibly proud of the work that Assistant Secretary Newland and his entire team did on the first volume of this report. I particularly want to acknowledge the staff at the Bureau of Trust Funds Administration, which is managing the document collection, review, and records management of this initiative. The vast majority of the work being released today was done by Indigenous staff here at the department. In this department in various offices who worked through their own trauma and pain to ensure that we have this report to release today. I honor all of you for your contributions to moving our country forward to provide a better future for our youth. This report lays the groundwork for the continued research and work of the Interior Department to address the intergenerational trauma and consequences of federal Indian boarding school policies. And with the recent congressional investment of $7 million for this effort in fiscal year 2022, we are grateful to have much needed resources to continue the work. Our efforts will include steps we can and must take now to alter the course of our future. We must work to preserve Native languages. We must invest in support services for Indigenous peoples, and we must bear witness to the stories of American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian people. I come from ancestors who endured the horrors of the Indian boarding school assimilation policies carried out by the same department that I now lead. This department was responsible for operating what we now know to be 408 federal boarding schools across 37 states, or then territories, including 21 schools in Alaska and 7 schools in Hawaii. Now we are uniquely positioned to assist in the effort to recover the dark history of these institutions that have haunted our families for too long. As a Pueblo woman, it is my responsibility, and frankly, it's my legacy. As part of the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative and in response to recommendations from the report, today I am launching a year-long tour, The Road to Healing. I will travel across the country to use my platform to elevate American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian survivors of the Federal Indian Boarding School system and give them the opportunity to share their stories, help connect communities with trauma-informed support, and facilitate the collection of a permanent oral history. This is one step among many that we will take. The department's work thus far shows that an all-of-government approach is necessary to strengthen and rebuild the bonds within Native communities that federal Indian boarding schools set out to break. With the President's direction, we have begun working through the White House Council of Native American Affairs on the path ahead to preserve tribal languages, invest in survivor-focused services, and honor our trust obligations to Indigenous communities. The fact that I am standing here today as the first Indigenous Cabinet Secretary is testament to the strength and determination of Native people. I am here because my ancestors persevered. I stand on the shoulders of my grandmother and my mother, and the work we will do with the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative will have a transformational impact on the generations who follow. I thank you all so much for being here and for covering this critical issue. And now I want to introduce a colleague that I am so proud to serve next to Assistant Secretary Brian Newman.
Bonjour, everyone. The way excuse me. Ani Nibanami Kana Bamose and Dishnakas, Mayangan no dem, Ginoshkani and Donchba. Nishnabe and Dao. I want to thank you all for being here. To the press who are covering this issue that has been ignored for too long. I want to thank the members of our team here at the department. We have so many folks in the back who helped put this report together. It's been an exhausting and emotional effort for them to confront this horror on a daily basis, to bring this information to you. I'm deeply grateful for their work, both as a member of Secretary Holland's leadership team and as somebody who grew up in a family and a community that's been impacted by these boarding schools. Federal Indian boarding schools have had a lasting impact on Native people and communities across America. And that impact continues to influence the lives of countless families, from the breakup of families and tribal nations, to the loss of languages and cultural practices and relatives. Excuse me. This has left lasting scars for all Indigenous people. There's not a single American Indian, Alaska Native, or Native Hawaiian in this country whose life hasn't been affected by these schools. We haven't begun to explain the scope of this policy era until now. Under the leadership of Secretary Holland, the department has for the first time started an investigation of the federal Indian boarding school system. This report that we're releasing to you today places the Indian boarding school system in its historical, legal, and policy context and details initial investigative findings, including an official list of federal Indian boarding schools. This report confirms that this boarding school system was part of a twin United States policy: the dispossession of Indian lands and the forced assimilation of Indian people. The report explains that the federal government pursued this policy of forced assimilation by targeting Indian children. Federal Indian boarding schools were the primary means to carry out this policy. And the report shows that all three branches of the federal government impacted this system. Multiple generations of American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian children were induced or compelled by the federal government to be brought to these schools. Given their political and legal status as Indians and Native Hawaiians, as recognized by the United States Constitution and centuries of Supreme Court precedent and congressional legislation. For this investigation, the department first engaged and consulted with tribes, Alaska Native villages, Alaska Native corporations, and Native Hawaiian communities to incorporate their concerns and views into our work. Through the Bureau of Trust Funds Administration, we identified and examined federal records to develop an official list of federal Indian boarding schools and to identify marked and unmarked burial sites. And through a formal partnership with the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition, who was instrumental in sharing information and records that contributed to this report. As of today, our work shows that from 1819 to 1969, the United States operated or supported 408 boarding schools across 37 states or then territories, including 21 schools in Alaska and 7 in Hawaii. The report identifies each of those schools by name and location, some of which operated across multiple sites. While generations of Indian and Native Hawaiian children entered these boarding schools, many died, often far from their homes and families. We've identified 53 marked or unmarked burial sites and cemeteries for Indian children across the system, with more site discoveries expected as we continue our research. The department will not make public the specific locations of burial sites associated with this system to protect against very real threats of grave robbing, vandalism, and other desecration. Our initial investigation results show that approximately 50% of federal Indian boarding schools may have received support or involvement from religious institutions or organizations, including funding, infrastructure, and personnel. The federal government at times paid religious institutions and organizations on a per capita basis for Indian children to enter the schools that these institutions and organizations operated. The investigation shows that in addition to congressional appropriations, the United States may have used monies held in tribal trust accounts, including those based on cessions of Indian lands to the United States, to fund Indian children to attend these schools. The report describes the condition that Indian and Native Hawaiian children experienced. These conditions included militarized and identity alteration methodologies on kids. Federal records also affirm that the federal Indian boarding school system discouraged or prevented the use of indigenous languages and focused on vocational training, involvement of manual labor, and Indian children. The report identifies the Running Bear studies, quantitative research based on now adult federal Indian boarding school attendees' medical status that indicates that the boarding school system continues to impact the present-day health of Indian people who participated in that study. These results verify the need for a comprehensive review and report by an independent research group to assess the current impacts that Indian boarding schools have had on American Indians, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians, including on their health, education, and economic status. In order to complete the objectives of this initiative, I've made 8 recommendations for the next steps of this investigation. Implementation of some of these recommendations will require the help and assistance of Congress. I want to point out that this investigation so far has been conducted with existing congressional appropriations, relying on the service of Bureau of Trust Funds Administration staff and volunteers from other department bureaus. Congress has provided $7 million to the department for advancing this investigation under fiscal year 2022 Consolidated Appropriations Act. This funding will permit us to help find answers to the pressing questions left unexamined in this report. Answers in our next volume we expect to include approximating the total number of children that attended these schools, approximating the total number of marked and unmarked burial sites, identifying names and ages and tribal affiliations of children interred at those burial sites, approximating the amount of federal support for this system, recognizing that some of our records may no longer exist. We will also examine and seek to identify religious institutions and organizations and other non-federal entities that ever received federal funding in support of this boarding school system. While this report spotlights a solemn period in U.S. history, it lays the groundwork for future-focused actions outlined in our recommendations. To begin the process of healing from the harm and the violence caused by Indian assimilation policy, the Department of the Interior should affirm an explicit and express policy of cultural revitalization, supporting the work of tribes, Alaska Native villages, and Native Hawaiian communities to revitalize their languages, cultural practices, and traditional food systems, and to protect and strengthen intra-tribal relations. We are engaging and supporting other federal agencies to assist this initiative, including those with control of any relevant records or that provide health care to American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians, including for the provision of mental health services to students attending our Bureau of Indian Education operated and funded schools. Every worthwhile journey begins with its first step. This report is not an end of that journey, it's a beginning. It marks one of the first steps on the road to help begin a healing process in this country. For Indian country and the Native Hawaiian community, the entire United States, and every person in every tribal community from the Alaskan tundra to the Florida Everglades and everywhere in between. Miigwech, thank you all for being here. Thank you for bearing with us.
Miigwech, Secretary Deb Helen, Assistant Secretary Brian Newland. You got a chance to see some of the efforts that's happening from Washington, but when it comes down to it, how does this affect our local community? And here you are on the sacred ground where we're able to come together, honoring, healing, and remembering in the shadow of where these atrocities took place that they were talking about. We'd like to thank our friends from C-SPAN and from IT that provided the help on getting this message to you. But this is a message of survival. And one of the things that we're going to talk about right now is the journey of boarding school survival and healing through culture. And we have one of our friends from the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians from Harbor Springs that's joining us today. And I'd like to give an introduction to Sister Rochelle. She's with us today with her husband Frank, and she's worked for the state of Michigan for 30 years. She began her career as a program assistant for urban Indian concerns with the Department of Social Services. During her career, she's held many positions. She's worked as the director of Office of Native American Affairs in the Administration for Child and Family Services, the Family Independent Agency, or commonly known as FIA. During her tenure as Director of Native American Affairs, she was instrumental in the adoption of policy regarding Indian child welfare. Rochelle has earned her associate degree from Lansing Community College, also a graduate of the Lansing Community Leadership Development Academy. Rochelle has also served as past chair of the Little Traverse Bay Band of Indians Child Welfare Commission. She is the vice president of the Michigan Indian Education Council. She serves on the board of the National Indian Child Welfare Association, NICWA, and she is the past vice president of that organization. She currently is on the National Native American Boarding Schools Healing Coalition, where she served as a past vice president. I'd like you to go ahead and put your hands together for Rochelle Edewagijic. Please, Rochelle.
Bonjour. Rochelle Edewagijic, Adishnikos, Nimki Dodam, Wakanaksin Odawa, Endau, Wikwi Tongsin, Donji. And I was born in Detroit at Pass Corridor. That's where a lot of Indians gathered. Many years ago, my mother and father met there in Cass Corridor. They used to go to the bars and dance. That's how Indians got together back then. That's how they met each other. So that's how my parents met each other. And today, I'd like to talk about healing and survival through culture. I think that's one of the ways that we as Native people, American Indians, we get together. We love to get together. We love to laugh. We love to share many, many stories. We love to go to powwows. We love to go to ceremonies. Those are the things that bring us together. Those are the things that heal us as well. And we might not really think about it. I haven't thought about the healing that getting together has been. So many times our people have gotten together and shared a lot of good times together. And I'd like to start my presentation telling you about my grandmother, Agnes Saginaw. She was here. She was taken from her family. She was born on Drummond Island, and she was taken here, and she was here at this boarding school for many, many years. And she never graduated. We used to laugh, my father and my grandmother, that she didn't pass like the 5th grade. But as they kept on keeping her year after year, and finally they released her. And she went back home, and she lived in Sault Ste. Marie, and she was stayed and lived in Sugar Island. But eventually she came down to Detroit. And my father was born in Sault Ste. Marie, and he came down to Detroit as well. And this is a picture of my grandmother, Agnes. I love that name, Agnes. You don't hear that very much anymore. And that's my father in this picture, John Noose, my father. And I really am happy to be here, to be able to talk about the experiences that we shared, our family, my father and my grandmother. Here's a picture of my father as an adult. He was born in 1907. And he did not go to this boarding school. He passed away in 1977, it was a long time ago, and sometimes I wish I could have asked him many questions about my grandmother as well, about the boarding school here, and how they survived and how they lived through this. And when did they graduate? When did my grandmother graduate from here? There's so many questions that I wish I had. Now that I'm 72 years old, I wish I would have asked them these questions. So I'm doing more and more research on boarding schools, on my parents, and I want to talk about culture and Indians, Native Americans getting together. This is a picture of my dad's basketball team. My mother made all those headdresses. And my father was very athletic. He used to go and play. Indians love, sports. My father did hockey and baseball, basketball, football, you name it. He was very strong and athletic. And one day he noticed that all the players, they were running away, and he couldn't keep up with them. He was saying, wow, what's happening? So my mother talked to him about this, and she said, and he was very brokenhearted that he couldn't keep up with the younger men anymore. So my mother said, well, why don't you coach a team? You love the sports. Why don't you just get some teams and go across the country, the area here in Michigan? And that really perked my father up. He says, oh, that's a good idea. I like that. So he had basketball teams. This is one of his basketball teams. And I wish I knew who all these players are, but they're all Native Americans. He always recruited Native Americans to play basketball, football, and baseball. And one of the things he used to go to these different little counties all across Michigan, and he would always advertise in the newspaper, the undefeated Indians, best team anywhere. We were undefeated. So sometimes they did get defeated. And that would make the local teams really happy. Oh, we beat the Indians. And sometimes they didn't. They got beat. So, but he'd always advertise that, and we also used to get a chuckle about that. But that's one of the ways I believe that we heal through our culture, getting together, doing these activities. And these activities continue. A lot of Indians, they love bowling. And I was on a bowling team with my first husband. And we just loved to bowl and get together. I mean, we always were getting together wherever we were. And this is a picture of my mother, Daisy Crampton Shano. And this is when she was a young lady living in Detroit. And my mother, she went to the Lansing School for the Blind. When she was a child, about 3 years old, the Spanish influenza swept the world. And she lived in Manistee. She was a Odawa. And during that time, she was about 3 years old, and her the Spanish flu took her mother and her parents and her little baby brother. So she was orphaned. So she went to live with her grandmother, Senmoquay, which is a tobacco woman. And my mother's name was Wassa. So she went to live with her. But my mother, when she was about 3 or 4 years old, she didn't understand what happened to her mom and dad, her little brother, and why she had to go live with her grandmother. So she went out in the woods. This is in Manistee, in that area. Brother is where it was. And she went looking for her parents, her baby brother. And while she was out there, and she was only about 3 or 4 years old, she went out in the woods, and then the family started looking for her. They said, "Oh, what happened to her?" And they went, and they discovered her in a bramble bush, and the brambles had scratched her eyes, and which caused an infection. They finally found her, and so my grandmother, she was a very powerful medicine woman, and she tried to cure my mother of the infection, but it didn't work. And they didn't want to take her to a white doctor because they were afraid. They were afraid that she'd be taken away, but eventually they didn't have any choice, so they took her to the white doctor. The white doctor came, picked her up, and they never saw her again until she turned about 18 years old. She went to Ann Arbor. They had several operations on her eyes to cure that infection. And that infection left a lot of scars around her face, on her eyes. So from there, when she told me that she always hated that name, Daisy. And I said, "Well, why do you hate that name, Daisy?" I like it. So she told me when she was in the hospital, she was laying there, and at that time, instead of the wonderful medicines we have nowadays that can put you to sleep during your operations, what they did to her is at that time they used ether. And when she was put under for those operations, she would, wake up and she would be screaming because that's some of the effects of that ether would have on someone. So when she'd wake up, she'd be with the nurses, and the nurses would say to her, "What's your name?" And she said, Tacy. And they were trying to figure out Tacy. Oh, that must mean Daisy. Okay, your name is Daisy. And she didn't like that because, after she grew up, she realized that Daisy was not her name. Her name was Wawatesi. And because she was about 3 or 4 years old, she was, all she spoke was her Anishinaabe. They thought they gave her the name Daisy. And she never liked that. So that's why she never liked her name Daisy. Her name was Wawatesi, which means firefly. And I was looking at some of the records here at the boarding school, because I'm doing a little research on my family and my parents. So I have one mother who went to a boarding school. She went to the Lansing State Blind School for the blind. And I also discovered she was here too. Her name appears here at Mount Pleasant. And I was looking for my grandmother's name, but I guess when she was here, there's some records that aren't quite available. So I have to do more research on my grandmother, because the years that she would have been here, I guess they're, I don't know if they're lacking, but the records aren't complete, I guess. So I need to do some more research, because I really love to find out more about my grandmother. My grandmother, when I was a child, she used to tell me Nanabuju stories. And I used to love that. You know, she used to, but I thought, wow, this is weird. I never heard Nanabuju stories, because we lived out in Elmont, in a white community, farming community. And I remember some of those stories from when I was a child. And so I was with my husband, and he was giving a presentation on Nanabuju stories and whatnot. And one of these stories that I had only heard her talk about, my husband told, which really, I thought, wow, that's amazing. So much is taken away from you in your culture. You don't know about a lot of things, and you just wonder, well, I know this, but does anybody else know this? And I found someone that did know this, my husband there. So I want to also talk about, and I think I'm a board member of the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. And what we do is we've been working to gather information to help get information on boarding schools, and we're contracted now with the Federal Bureau with Deb Holland and Brian Newland to do research on boarding schools. So I'm really excited as we do more research and find out, you know, some of these records, all the records that went on to our families in the past. There's so much I don't know, but I believe that we as a people, I mean, here is a great example of we're all together. We're here honoring people who went to this school, and we're here together as a people, and we have our families. And I was told, and I believe this to be true, that there has been no Indian that has not been touched by boarding schools. Isn't that amazing? Everybody that we would know who are Native American, who live throughout this country, Canada, you name it, have been touched by boarding schools. So all the people who are descendants, they've been touched. And it has touched us in a lot of negative ways. But one of the things, we are resilient people, and we get together and we have fun, we tell jokes, we tell stories. So I'm very hopeful. It may take years to find out all this information, but I certainly hope we will, and we will do that. And on this picture is the board of the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition Board of Directors. We had a retreat, and this is the board. And as doing research for this presentation, I've found out that there is, and then the report that Deb Holland has released shows that there were 5 boarding schools, and I have them listed on the screen here. In the UP, there's a Catholic, the Chippewa boarding school, and then there was Holy Childhood of Jesus School, and there was the Holy Chippewa in Baraga. Here in Mount Pleasant, there was the Mount Pleasant Industrial School, and then also there was another school in the UP called the, that was, I already said that, in Schoolcraft. So these are some of the schools, and I've also been told that there were more boarding schools here in Michigan. So I think even though the report says that there's only 5 boarding schools here in Michigan, I think there are more boarding schools, and I think that research has to be done. And I think that's why we share information to find out. We've got to find out what has happened to. We think about the past generations, the 7 generations before us, and those 7 generations that are coming ahead of us. And this is just an example of the boarding schools that are here in Michigan. And so this is, but like I say, there are more boarding schools. I left off the one in Schoolcraft, so I'll have to update that one. As I give this presentation to other places, one of the most famous pictures of boarding schools here in Michigan is this picture of all the children marching in front of the boarding school of Mount Pleasant in their little cute outfits. And I wonder, is my grandmother one of those little children marching around? I look at that, and I'm sure a lot of people wonder, is that my past grandmother, my grandfather, great-grandmother, great-grandfather? And I think I'm going to be able to update some of my pictures, because this is also a stock picture, but I think I might go and take some pictures today as I'm around, and remembering and thinking about how my grandmother must have survived here. As Deb Holland and Brian Newland has talked about historical trauma, one of the things that I know this is a lot of words here. I'm not going to read them, but we all know here that we have such the trauma that has affected us as a family. I often wonder why my grandmother acted the way she did, because she had a drinking problem, and my father had a drinking problem, and that isn't lost on our families. My brothers, who were both Vietnam vets, they couldn't survive. They had drinking problems. They were alcoholics. My brother Norman Shano, he passed away due to his alcoholism. So, and this has affected us greatly as a people. And I believe that's due to the treatment that we've had at boarding schools. I know some of the people up in Harbor Springs talk about some of the trauma and abuse that they've had. It's just horrifying. One Indian gentleman was talking about his brother, and tried to speak our language, but we're told, no, don't speak that language, no. And if you did something, they would beat you. And so his brother was trying to speak his language, and the priest caught him, and he whipped him with a horse whip. And he never spoke again, not one word, English, anything. That's the trauma that we have. So, September 30th is one of the days, National Day of Remembrance for the U.S. boarding schools. Wear your orange. That's a good way to remember. And you can take a look at the National Boarding School Coalition, and here's the address. I have it on the screen here, which boardingschoolshealing.org. These are information that we need to take a look at if you're interested, and I know you're interested, to find out some of the things that are causing some of the things that have happened to us as a people. Just our descendants, it hasn't lost on our descendants either. So, and Deb Holland and Brian Newland has been talking about Truth and Healing Commission. So there will be a commission. They are studying people right now to have on that commission. And they will be having This is a bill for Truth and Healing Commission on Indian boarding school policies in the U.S. is officially bipartisan in both the U.S. Senate and House. Senator Lisa Murkowski, Republican, Vice Chairman of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, signed on as the lead Republican to co-sponsor the bill on November 16, 2021. One of the things I've had a long career with the state of Michigan, and one of the things that we worked on is putting together policy that affects our children, and a lot of families are suffering, and alcoholism, drug abuse have taken split families, so we have children who may not have a mother or father. So we must continuously work to improve the well-being of Indian children. That's what the National Indian Child Welfare Association's basic mission and policy. And we also ask that people become a member of the National Indian Child Welfare Association. This is a good organization. We go across the country and into Canada to give presentations on how to help people overcome and how to culturally help children and families, and how to have children and families stay together, to help them heal. So some of the things that NICWA does is or the Indian Child Welfare Act does, it establishes minimum federal standards for public and private removal of Indian children from their family, recognizes tribal nations' inherent tribal jurisdiction over their child custody proceedings, provides funding to tribes for the operation of child family programs. So NICWA is a program that helps our children. And then I'm not going to go through all the key requirements of the Indian Child Welfare Act or or NICWA. But we want to make sure that children stay in their families. That is the goal of the Indian Child Welfare Act and the National Indian Child Welfare Association, to make sure that children remain in their families and to help them. So when I was talking about the healing, the journey, and it's a long journey for families to heal and come back together. So one of the things I think about, one of the positive things as we come together is our families. And this is a picture of myself, my mother, my father. He's got his headdress on. They made all their outfits. This outfit is a Cheyenne dress. And so I'm a Cheyenne in this picture. That's what I'm dressed as. So, and we did a lot of dancing. We had a dance group that went all around Michigan. And B. Jackson and I danced together. She was a Cheyenne that night too. You know that, B? Yeah, we were the twins. I wish I had a picture of that. I'd post it up here. And this is a picture of my my mother, Daisy Shano. And she lived a long, good life. She walked on when she was 96 years old. And she talked about her experiences in Michigan State Blind School. And she didn't even know she was Indian. So one day the principal or the superintendent came by and tapped her on the head and said, "You're a little Indian girl." And she said, "I am? Oh my goodness." If you remember, she was taken away when she was about 3 or 4 years old. My mother doesn't have a birth certificate. She didn't even know when her birthday was. So she ran over there and tells some of her girlfriends, hey, guess what? I'm an Indian. They said, Daisy, quit that. There are no Indians left. And she said, well, that's what the superintendent told me. He said, I'm an Indian. And he said, Daisy, quit that line. But she remembers that very well. I remember that story too. Oh, there, me and my husband. We were at Manistee Powwow. We're busy dancing away there with all our people. And it's good to have everyone together, like it is here today. Everyone together, honoring those people who have been in the boarding schools and who have survived those boarding schools. Because they really had to survive and the things that happened to our children. So I want to thank everyone for listening to me, and I think that we're a resilient people. We get together, it's healing to laugh, to have fun, and to be together like we are today. So I say, miigwech for listening to me, and thank you very much.
Miigwech, Sister Rochelle Edewagijik. Let's give her a hand. Continuing on with our afternoon presentations is Lacey Kennard here. Lacey Kennard. Ah, there she is. Okay, well, as we watch for Lacey to get her presentation up, let me go ahead and give you some information on her. She's going to go ahead and to give a presentation on truth, justice, and healing Indian boarding schools in the U.S. And Lacey is Makwa Odekwe, bare-hearted woman, and she's an enrolled member in the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. Lacey's worked as an office administrator and academic advisor in Indigenous education in Michigan and Wisconsin for the past 15 years. She's also worked as an administrator for the Indian Health Service facility in Milwaukee. She was a member and chairperson for the Milwaukee Indian Education Committee. She grew up in Anishinaabe Joaquin, the land of the Anishinaabe, in the UP of Michigan. And she graduated from Northern Michigan University and Bay College with a degree in business. Lacey descends from several boarding school attendees who survived Holy Childhood of Jesus School in Michigan, Mount Pleasant Industrial Indian Boarding School here in Michigan, and the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania. Lacey is extremely passionate about empowering Native youth, advocating for those wrongly convicted, fighting mass incarceration, and strengthening the Native vote. Her partner, Danny Wilbur, is an enrolled member of the Oneida Nation in Wisconsin, and they have a Namoosh named Wabi. And Lacey works with the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. So we'd like to give a big honoring, healing, and welcome. Come on up, Lacey. Is Rochelle still here? We're looking for the little clicker that we had for the...
switch them for now.
Okay, in the meantime, Lacey, we're going to go ahead and do this by tribal and error. Just say next slide, please, and we're going to help you out and get through this. Lacey Kennard.
I'm going to try not to cry. Ani buju makwade klendish nakas. Saginaw paga and Chippewa makwadoram. Do you know which button to press?
Right, just check it.
Okay.
Right button.
Hi, my name is Lacey. My native name means bear-hearted woman, and I'm from the Bear Clan. I am from Saginaw, Michigan, and a member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. I work for the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition as a member of the Program and Operations Coordinator. As you can see from the agenda, Dr. Sam Torres, our Deputy CEO, was supposed to be here and do the keynote. And unfortunately, he had flight issues, so he couldn't be with us today. So here I am doing my very first presentation on behalf of NABS with very little time to prepare, so bear with me. Next slide, please. I want to start by acknowledging that this land is known as the home to the Anishinaabe people, where we continue to make our home, speak our language, and continue to practice our culture and teachings. The National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition supports the revitalization efforts of the Anishinaabe language. With NABS being a national organization, we are active in Indigenous communities all over the country. We are extremely honored to be here today to share space with you to honor and remember our ancestors, boarding school survivors and attendees, descendants of the Indian boarding schools in an effort to heal. Here you can see the small but mighty crew of phenomenal people that work at NABS. I hope it's on the screen. Oh.
Can't get the change slide. Up and down, left and right. Try both. Right here? Go back. One more.
Okay. Here you can see a small but mighty crew of phenomenal people that work at NABS. We're a team of 9 right now, and we are hiring for a PR director and a director of healing programs. If you are aware of anybody that fits those qualities, you can see the position descriptions on our website. Before finding out I had to take Dr. Torres' spot today, I was only planning to speak on why I chose to work for NABS and my connection to what is now called Michigan. I am a descendant of a boarding school survivor. My grandma, Donna Harvick Ballinger, attended Holy Childhood School in Harbor Springs and sadly passed away in 2014. My grandma didn't talk much about her boarding school experience because she said if she started talking, she wouldn't be able to stop crying. I do this work in her honor. Here with me today is my mom, Wabaxi Quay, and my aunties, Jean and Pat, who are boarding school survivors of that same school. It was not that long ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when I realized the depth of the damage that boarding school did. I knew it affected my people, but I didn't ever realize how much it affected my family. And me, which ultimately affected me. And when I finally realized that, that's when my healing began. Almost immediately, it bridged the distance between me and my mom. Once I learned how huge this was, I wanted to help more people and families learn this. It was a whole entire systematic policy that was created to wipe out our people. And the fact that we are still here today made me feel like I had a responsibility to do the work that our ancestors fought for. While working in administration at the Hannibal Potawatomi Indian School, I became involved with NABS about a year ago and was hired about 2 months ago. And I truly feel like this work, because it doesn't feel like work, is my calling, and I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. NABS is a coalition of members that support survivors/attendees and descendants that uses their voice to educate others about the truth of the federal Indian boarding school policy era. We call for action towards truth, justice, and healing. Our effort is to widen the circle to share research, healing resources, and advocacy. Our work is in many areas, but our current main priorities are digitization of the Indian boarding school records, advocacy of HR 5444 in Senate Bill 2907, the Truth and Healing Commission on Indian Boarding School Policies Act bill, which is in front of the U.S. House and Senate, working with the Department of Interior, and educating and speaking at conferences. On May 7th, Secretary Deb Haaland of the Department of Interior visited us at our headquarters in Minneapolis. Personally, it was a bucket list item and a life goal to meet her, and it was an honor to be able to take a selfie with her. And during her visit, she shared with us that the Biden administration is supporting Indian country in this movement with an all-of-government approach, which is the first time in the United States government history. Following that monumental visit, some of NAB's team went to Washington, D.C. to advocate for the Truth and Healing Commission bill. We visited many congressional offices on the day before and the day of the press release. The press release is what the video we watched earlier. On May 11th, that day, NABS was invited to the press conference where the first volume of the Department of Interior Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative Investigative Report was released. I had the honor of sitting in the second row and being there in this monumental, historic time. NABS's role in the 106-page report was meeting with them weekly to discuss the school locations, as NABS had already compiled a list of 367 schools, which included federally supported and mission-supported schools. In the DOI report, they focused strictly on federally supported schools and have a recorded total of 408 schools across 37 states. NABS's updated number is now 497 schools, which includes their 408 plus 89 mission-supported schools only. Our team is currently updating that list and map, and it will be released in the near future. So while the DOI is saying 408, we're saying 497, and we know that number is going to grow. In the DOI report, they state that there are 53 burial sites, including 33 marked, 6 marked, and 14 combined of marked and unmarked. We know that's a very small number. We don't have to do investigative reporting or research to figure that out. We know it will increase. What the number will be is what we don't know yet. The location of these burial sites are being kept private in order to protect the sites from vandalism, people trying to dig things up, things like that. In the report, it lists that there are 5 Indian boarding schools in the state of Michigan. Through NABS's own research, we know that number is actually around 30. Research is ongoing and the schools are currently being classified into categories of boarding schools, day schools, and orphanages. We know we have heard a lot of feedback from the Department of Interior report saying that they forgot a lot. Where are all the other schools? They strictly only focused on boarding schools that met 4 different criteria to be listed on that list. Right now, NABS's list also only includes boarding schools. We do not have day schools on our list, so that 497 number does not include day schools or orphanages. It only strictly includes boarding schools. During our trip in DC, our advocacy of the Truth and Healing Commission was the priority. On May 12th, for the first time in United States history, Indian boarding school survivors testified about their experiences in front of the Subcommittee of Indigenous Peoples in Congress. Over the course of a few weeks, Congress was accepting written testimony in support of H.R. 5444. We also received copies of those testimonies, and we know that we had a couple from this area, as well as quite a few from Michigan. In total, we received testimonies from 34 survivors, 76 descendants, 8 tribes and organizations, and 49 non-native allies. Collection for the House is closed now. However, we are still collecting testimony for our hearing that will be in the United States Senate. Testimonies can be submitted via email to info@nabshc.org. Now I want to play a short video that we recently released. And hopefully it has volume. No, it does not. It's not playing yet, but so there's your volume.
Sounds like there's another video in the background.
Implementation of this policy been compiled or analyzed to determine the full scope of its reaches and effects. We must uncover the truth about the loss of human life. Today, I'm announcing and sharing with you all, first, that the department will launch the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative. At no time in history have the records or documentation of this policy been compiled or analyzed to determine the full scope of its reaches and effects. We must uncover the truth about the loss of human life and the lasting consequences of these schools. This investigation will identify past boarding school facilities and sites, the location of known and possible burial sites located at or near school facilities, and the identities and tribal affiliations of children who were taken there. I know that this process will be long and difficult. I know that this process will be painful. It won't undo the heartbreak and loss that so many of us feel. But only by acknowledging the past can we work toward a future that we're all proud to embrace.
I remember being afraid to sleep at night, fearful of the matron's son who walked the halls at night, using a flashlight to spot me in bed. He touched me like no child should ever be touched. As a little girl, those hands were huge.
We started to cry when the lights went out. We cried for our parents and our mothers. And it caught on. Pretty soon, the whole dorm, the whole wing of the dorm was wailing into the night. Until the next day, our eyes were closed shut. We could barely open our eyes. And that crying occurred days in and days out and weeks in and weeks in and out and months. Until toward the middle of the school year, no child ever cried anymore. A friend of mine was a favorite of an administrator who took her out of her classroom almost on a daily basis so that he could sexually molest her in his office. She showed me her arms. I don't know if much of you who know anything about cuttings, but she had scars on both sides of her arms, and scars upon scars and scars. We know that she was trying to take the pain away from the memory of all of those sexual molestations she had. It was so bad that she developed multiple personalities. She died 5 or 6 years ago, and her stories to me is just so graphic. I knew things were bad for the boys, but I also realized that the girls suffered extremely harshly as well.
The consequences of federal Indian boarding school policies, including the intergenerational trauma caused by forced family separation and cultural eradication, which were inflicted upon generations of children as young as 4 years old, are heartbreaking and undeniable.
This is like lasting scars for all Indigenous people. There's not a single American Indian, Alaska Native, or Native Hawaiian in this country whose life hasn't been affected by these schools.
Our children deserve to be found. Our children deserve to be brought home. We are here for their justice, and we will not stop advocating until the United States fully accounts for the genocide committed against Native children. The time is now. Tigwitsi, Haichka, Isha, Miigwech. Thanking you in our languages and praying that our languages come back with as much love and strength as our ancestors spoke them.
The purpose of the Truth in Healing Commission bill is to develop a complete picture of the ongoing impact of Indian boarding schools that had on generations of American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian people. It is critical to providing a path towards healing for individuals, families, and tribal communities that have endured devastating consequences of Indian boarding school policies. The key provisions of S 2907 and HR 5444 are to examine the location of children, document ongoing impact from boarding schools, locate church and government records, have culturally appropriate public hearings, gather institutional knowledge, share those findings publicly, and provide recommendations to the United States government. For more information on this bill, you can visit our website at boardingschoolhealing.org/Truth Commission. To support the Truth and Healing Commission bill, NABS is requesting support from our allies. We need support from tribes, tribal organizations, non-governmental organizations, museums, state-operated archives, and college and universities, just to name a few. Those just listed can go to our website and use a provided resolution template. Each and every person can and are encouraged to reach out to your senator. Reach out to your senator and House representatives and ask them to support HR 5444 and Senate Bill 2907 by becoming a co-sponsor and to help push this bill forward. This week, in 2 days, the bill goes up for markup in the House, which is progress that we need to see and what we've been looking for. There's finally movement in this bill in the House. Currently, we are still working on getting a hearing in front of the Senate Committee of Indian Affairs. In closing, I want to acknowledge that yes, we do carry intergenerational trauma. You often hear those words, intergenerational and historic trauma. What we also carry is intergenerational wisdom. In our genes and DNA is strength, wisdom, resiliency, and determination, and we cannot forget that. Miigwech for this opportunity, to Willie and Marcella for welcoming me into your community. I am truly grateful for our board member, Ms. Rochelle Edowadijic, for being here as well. And I'm just truly grateful for this opportunity. If you want to become more involved with NABS, become a member, you can find all the information on our website. And if you can please follow us on social media. We are releasing things often, and there's a lot of movement going on, so we just need to spread the word and become more aware of what's going on and spread the word to get support from our congressional leaders and senators. Thank you.
Miigwech, Sister Lacey from the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. Let's hear it for her one more time. Intergenerational trauma, intergenerational wisdom. That's a good way to look at it. We're going to share some more teachings with you. I see our Anishinaabe Kwe is getting our grounds set with our cedar teachings, getting ready for our jingle dress. I do have a couple of housekeeping announcements. Our friends that helped us out with our lunch said there are to-go containers if you'd like to take some food home to your family. So you have a chance to go ahead and to do that. So make sure that you get a to-go container. We also had an announcement on our 50-50, last call for 50-50 drawings. So if you'd like to go ahead and get a 50-50 ticket, here's your last call. It was over $400.
Over $600.
It's over $600. So
to take home.
to take home. So if you want to get that opportunity, here's your chance to go ahead and to buy your 50/50 ticket. And our silent auction items, we're going to close our silent auction at 3 o'clock. You have about 11 minutes to place those final bids. So make sure that you place those final bids for the silent auction. And we're going to give you some moments to go ahead and to get over to the silent auction table to pick up any of those 50/50 drawings. And if we could have a couple gentlemen help us out with getting some chairs into the arena for our jingle dress portion, that would be helpful. And at 3 o'clock, we're going to have a MIBS committee update by our very own Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, Marcella Haddon. And then we're going to go into our jingle dress healing dance ceremony. I'd like to say another chi miigwech to our Saginaw Chippewa Academy AB team for lighting the Ishkite, the sacred fire. I'd like to say another chi miigwech for our Onion Creek Singers for bringing the heartbeat of our nation into the grounds with us today. And I also have an announcement from the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal Police. We did have a couple of the youth that breached the perimeter of the boarding school as we were doing our ceremonies today. There are still people trying to break into the boarding school. So that's why we keep it patrolled. Please make sure that you do a tour of the boarding school instead of taking your own guided tour yourself. And we're going to go ahead and to continue at 3 o'clock. Get in those silent auction bids and get in your 50/50 drawings. Jimmy Butch.
Well, we were going to wait till 3 o'clock, and if you're going to go ahead and,
I'll do it now. I'll do it now. All right. Bonjour. Nini Gisus Kwandizikas, Wajiji Donam, Saginaw Keenan Donjama, Anishinaabe Kwandao. My name is Marcella Haddon, and I am the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe of Michigan. I'm so proud of Deb Halen. I just love that woman. And yeah, truly, we would not get as far as we're going to get with Boarding School Initiative if it wasn't for a Native in that position. I guarantee you. No one would do that for us. We have to fight for ourselves. All right, so I want to thank some people. First of all, I want to thank our Tribal Council and Tribal Administration for all their support. I want to introduce the committee. We do have a committee, a full committee. We've been meeting for a couple of years now. I am the chair. We have Kathleen Lett as the vice chair. We have Zach Francis as the treasurer. The secretary PR is Eric Rodriguez and Joe Samek. We also have Daisy Costas. She's the community representative. Alice Ricketts is our council member representative. From our environmental department, we have Brianna Knudsen. Also, we have tribal police come to our meeting. We have construction, tribal college. We have Guadalupe Gonzalez. And we have Isabel Osamek, who prays in the language at every meeting that we hold. We also have Shannon Peters from Utilities and Dave Chatfield from our safety department. So it's made up of a lot of people, a lot of departments. We meet once a month. We also have Colleen Bree from CMU. We have Mindy Bailey from CMU. And Dr. Colleen Wilson-Rood, also from CMU. Right now the buildings are all secure. They weren't secure 2 years ago. Every building had an entry point where you could get into it, and people did take advantage of it. We were able to get grants from the National Park Service for metal mesh, and we put those over all the entrances. We do have a fence up and the solar cameras, and that was also from the National Park Service. We have entrance gates on the north and south side, and those were purchased by the Saginaw Chippewa tribe. And also the National Park Service provided us with signs, which we will be putting up soon. Last summer we had paid volunteer positions, and there are 2 people on Friday night and Saturday night. They receive $100 a night to secure the property, and that's from 10 p.m. till about 4 or 5 a.m. If you're interested, please call me or our admin, Courtney Kagigab. She does all the paperwork. Thank you, Courtney, for making sure that that's scheduled all through the summer. The proceeds from the silent auction will be used for that. We are going to continue to, and even though all the buildings are secure right now, people still break in. They've ripped the metal mesh right off of it. It's so sad that they want to get in there, and you know, they're not really healthy. They're full of lead and asbestos. So if you know anybody and you want to tattle, let us know. Tell tribal police. We continue to work with an architect, a pro bono architect from England. He is a Sault Ste. Marie tribal member. He's helping us to generate computer animated design for the building, for 3 of them anyway. Our next phase of that project is to be working with a structural engineer, but keep in mind, we have no funding. All of our funding is going to come from grants. Some of the grants that we applied for have been EAP in the past. However, EAP doesn't like to give grants unless they know what the plan is for the building, which is what we're working on. And also, once you have a plan, they're going to want to know how it's going to affect the surrounding community. So we're working on that. We do have in progress Department of Interior, Native American Business Development Institute, and that grant will help us hire people for a market study. So we actually need that when we do the EPA grants and all the other grants. So we're looking forward to that one. That's in progress. We also, the other one in progress is bipartisan infrastructure law, and that will help our tribe's environmental programs. And then Zebawing just hired a position for Council on Library Information Resources. It's called the Clear Grant, and that's a collaboration between Zebawing, NABS, and Indigenous Digital Archives. And that person is going to be digitizing and cataloging records and making those hidden records available to boarding school survivors. Another thing I want to let you know is we are going to be doing ground penetrating radar on all 320 acres to make sure that there is, we don't find burial grounds here. And that's, yes, thank you. And that is going to be used with 2% funds. We have to work with the city on that. Our holdup right now is that some language in the deed has to be changed. And so when you do that with the state of Michigan, it's just not a matter of, going to your attorney's office and changing this deed. It has to be legislative. So we're waiting for that language to be changed. And we will probably also start doing field monitoring, maybe in the late summer, to get ready for that. So if you're interested in field monitoring, making sure that whoever is going to be doing the GPR is doing what they're supposed to be doing, let me know. It's going to be in our Tribal Observer in July. Also July, there's going to be a lot of coverage on the boarding school. We're gonna do a big push, a PR push to let people know what we're doing. So I hope, people don't think that, nothing's ever being done with the building. Stuff is being done. If you go to our website, you can see a list of things. Every time we apply for a grant, every time we update council, every time we have an HHR, all of it is recorded and put on our website. I don't know if Ruby is here. Ruby Mishabus, are you here? Ruby. Sounds like the silent auction is over. Ruby wanted to come up and read a poem, and I don't see her, and I think it was going to be a good poem because it was about the boarding schools, and the title of it is Train Ride to Genocide, and I haven't been able to see it yet, but maybe we'll put that in the July Tribal Observer too. Next year I'm thinking that we could probably have a panel and maybe some Q&A. People can ask questions. I don't know what questions people have, what people are thinking, but that might be something we could do next year too. Other than that, I guess we're going to get ready for our jingle dress dancers. And I appreciate everybody coming here. Safe travels back, and love to you all. Thank you.
They neglect